It is time for Jonathan Coachman, the coach, to give us his bracket. Tell us a little bit about how you go through this. I'm sure you use a little bit of everything from your early edge crew, the betting lines, the futures, and all that.
We have 20 minds at the early edge that I have to choose from, and I use none of them when it comes to my March Madness. None of them.
Okay, it's your own thing.
I'm the smartest guy in the room when it comes to this. I love this, and we have like over 3,000 people in our bracket challenge for the early edge, so I've got to represent because everybody thinks they can beat me. And Chris Hassel, as you know, they cannot.
It can't be done. No. Let's start in the South region, Coach. That's where we have the #1 overall seed, Alabama, in the South. And obviously, I know you're not going to have a 16 beaten to 1. You don't have crazy brackets. You have what you actually think is going to happen. So take us through Alabama advancing, but then an interesting game between Maryland and West Virginia.
Let's remember the last 5 years, a #1 seed has won the national championship. So this tournament has become very, very chalky. So we start at the top. Love Alabama, and I love West Virginia. Maryland's been good, but West Virginia, you saw them at the Big 12 tournament. They've been playing great. Then we move on down. I like San Diego State. They're really good defensively, but this year playing better offensively. They'll meet up with Virginia. There's no way Furman's going to be able to score on Virginia. I love them. Then moving on down, Creighton. This is going to be a high-scoring affair. I like the over 148, by the way, in this game. And they're going to be playing Baylor. Santa Barbara, welcome to the dance. It'll be a very quick dance for you. And then Utah State, the Aggies. Missouri wanted to show up in the SEC tournament. Well, they're not going to show up in this one either. I like Utah State for the upset there. And then Arizona. This is the team I've got going a long way. Princeton's nice, but Arizona can be overwhelming. And then as we go to the Sweet 16, I like Alabama to face Virginia. I think San Diego State's run stops right there. This is going to be a contrast of styles. There's no doubt about that. And then the other two, I like Baylor, and they've recently won a national championship, as we know, taking on Arizona. This is going to be a banger of a region, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, the Big 12 has won the last 2 national championships. Alabama against Virginia, Baylor against Arizona, your top 4 seeds advancing to the Sweet 16. Who goes to the Elite 8?
Well, I'm going to go with Alabama, and I went back and forth, but I think Arizona. They really, the last month or so, have really started to play good basketball. They won the Pac-12 tournament, beating UCLA, so I like the Wildcats to move on.
Okay, so Alabama and Arizona will be matching up in the Elite 8 of the South region in Coach's bracket. Let's move to the East region. That is where Purdue and Zach Edey, the likely player of the year in college basketball, the Boilermakers, the #1 overall seed. They struggled a little bit toward the end of the season, but then got it going in the Big Ten tournament.
And we know a lot of times in March Madness games, Chris, that it can be a slug it out, and that's what Purdue loves to do with the big fella inside. So I have, of course, got Purdue moving on, and they're going to play Memphis. Memphis, do not sleep on them. They just took it to Houston and laid them out on Sunday. So Memphis is a live team in this tournament. Then I love Duke. I think Duke's really starting to trend in the right direction. They played great in the ACC tournament, and they'll meet up with Tennessee. Tennessee's had some up and downs, which is why they're a 4 seed and not a 2 or a 3 seed, but I think this will be a pretty cool matchup. Then we go down to the bottom. I like Kentucky to move on over Providence, and I like Kansas State. Kansas State doesn't get a lot of attention, but they've had some pretty good wins this year in the Big 12, and I like them to meet up with Kentucky. And then at the bottom, USC out of the Pac-12, they'll beat Michigan State. There's a lot of Big Ten teams in it this year, but I think they won't last for very long. I like USC to take on Marquette, who plays very, very fast. They're a high-scoring team. They're a lot of fun to watch. This matchup should be terrific.
Okay, second round, you've got the Big Ten tournament champions against the American tournament champions, a Memphis team that you really like right now.
Well, I like them so much, I'm picking them to knock off Purdue as the #1 seed. I think Purdue will be the first #1 seed to get knocked out. And then Memphis will play Duke. Duke now is starting to play like when Coach K was their coach because they have a guy who was one of his mentees. Then we go to the bottom. I love Kentucky to beat Kansas State. Kentucky's much better than people give them credit for, and they'll meet up with Marquette. Ever since Marquette switched coaches, they've been a really good team. They're a 2 seed. And Kentucky-Marquette, this would be an incredible matchup down below.
Okay, so it's Memphis and Duke, Kentucky and Marquette. Who's heading to the Elite 8 in the East region?
This is where the run ends for Memphis. I think they'll finally wake up, and Duke is very steady. They've got some underrated underclassmen, and they'll start to grow up by weekend number 2, rather. And then Kentucky and Marquette. I like Marquette to move on. So we're going to see Duke and Marquette in the Elite Eight.
Okay, so we'll circle back for those Elite Eight matchups in the East and in the South in just a minute as we go through the coaches bracket here on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight. Let's head to the Midwest, and that's where we find not the #1 overall seed, but the team all season that's been favored to win the whole thing, the Houston Cougars, who right now are about 5-1 to win it all.
Well, we saw on Sunday their confidence really took a big-time hit because they were blown out by Memphis. But they're still the #1 seed because their resume deserves that. Northern Kentucky, I actually like the over 122.5 in this game as well because Houston will build a big lead and then they'll sit everybody. Then they're going to meet up with, you can't be too happy about this, can you?
Well, I know that you don't have Iowa going to the Sweet 16 because they haven't done that since I was a kid.
Correct. I don't even have them going to this weekend.
You got Bruce Pearl over the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, we worked with Bruce Pearl when we were at another. A great guy. So I think Auburn and their style, Iowa's been so up and down, as you know, that I can't put any confidence in them. So I think Houston-Auburn will play on the weekend. Then as we move on down, I like Miami. People are sleeping on Miami out of the ACC. For the entire season, they were terrific. And then they'll beat Drake, and then they're going to meet up with, Kent State. This goes against everything my early edge geniuses say. They say Indiana should walk all over Kent State. You got to pick some upsets, don't you? It can't be chalk all the way through because I'm going to pick Miami to go on. We'll get to that. So Kent State, this will just be an extra point if I get it. Then moving on down, I like Iowa State out of the Big 12. I think they'll beat Pittsburgh. Obviously, Pittsburgh moved on, beat Mississippi State last night. Then I like Xavier to beat Kennesaw State. Xavier is an up-and-down team. They like to score a lot. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch, and I think this should be a terrific matchup in the round of 32. Then moving on down, I like Texas A&M out of the SEC to beat Penn State. And this is tough because Penn State had a great run through the Big Ten tournament, but I just think Texas A&M is the class in this matchup, and they'll meet Texas. We saw what Texas did against KU to win the Big 12 tournament. They are a team that is trending in the right direction. They love their new head coach, and I think Texas will have a really nice run throughout this tournament. Then as we move on to the Sweet 16, I like Houston continue to move on. They have a style that just works in the NCAA tournament. Stiff defense and 2 or 3 really good offensive players. They will meet Miami of Florida in the Sweet 16. They will get past Kent State. As I said, do not sleep on this Miami Hurricanes team. They are good enough, Chris Hassel, to beat Houston.
They made the Elite Eight last year with basically the same team.
100%. You're absolutely right. Then let's go down. I like Xavier to move on past Iowa State. And then they're going to meet the Texas Longhorns. Texas, I had no idea that they would turn it around this quick. But boy, they're big, they're strong, their guard play is terrific. And as a 2 seed, I think they, not Houston, is the class of this region.
Okay, so Houston against Miami. Who do you like?
Well, I'm going to go with the Houston Cougars. I think they have enough to get to the Elite Eight. I think ultimately they'll be able to slow Miami down. Excuse me. Yeah, I went with Houston. So
yeah, that's Noah, our producer, just making. He always puts in one silly mistake per show, and we have to figure out where it's at. We just found it.
Oh, and we also found the bus that you threw him under also. So Houston, I've got playing Texas. And, it doesn't even matter that he got it wrong because I have Texas ultimately going, and we'll get back to that later. So it doesn't really matter. But I love Texas in this region. They're just built. They're built, and I think this is probably the weakest region of the 4.
That's the Midwest. We have one more region to pick here to the Elite Eight with Jonathan Coachman. It is the West region. That's where your Kansas Jayhawks are the #1 overall seed, and we hope to see Bill Self coaching again soon. We're still not 100% sure if he's going to be out there after his heart procedure last week.
Yeah, everything I'm hearing from my connections in the KU area that he probably won't be there for at least the first game, maybe even the first weekend. But most people favor them to go to the second week. I would assume he would be there if they make it to the Sweet 16.
All right, so Kansas in that first game taking on Howard. They're a 20-plus point favorite in that one.
Now, this may sound strange, but I like the fact that they got blown out by Texas because now they can refocus. And they said, because this happened before when they've had deep runs into the tournament, they haven't played great in the Big 12 tournament, and then they turn around and say, hey, let's get laser focused. So I like them to beat Howard, and they're going to meet up with Illinois. I think Illinois beats Arkansas in that first matchup. This is a coin flip for me. And Arkansas, we saw what their coaching staff did walking off the court. They just lost their cool. You cannot do that in the NCAA tournament. And I love Brad Underwood. Did you know that Brad Underwood and I graduated from the same high school? McPherson, Kansas. Shout out.
Really?
McPherson Bullpups, yes.
And how much older are you than him?
Very good. Let's move on. So as we go to the next group of games, I love VCU. if anybody watched VCU on the CBS Sports Network this past week, they were dynamic, and they beat St. Mary's, one of my upsets, in the early rounds. Then I like UConn to get it done against Iona. Rick Pitino, this will probably be, in all likelihood, his final game.
Where do you think he's going?
Well, I think he's going to St. John's.
I do too.
Yeah, he's not even going to have to move, probably. So then as we go to the bottom, I love TCU beating the winner of the Arizona State-Nevada game tonight. And then I like Gonzaga, Grand Canyon. I like the over in this game. Grand Canyon, they've gone to the over like 80% of the time. And you know Gonzaga loves to get up and down. So I love this matchup from an entertainment value. And then we all go down. I like Northwestern to beat Boise State. And then I like UCLA. UCLA, again, they have so much tournament experience with the guys they have on the team. I love them as a 2 seed.
Yeah, we were thinking maybe UCLA had a chance to get to that one line had they beaten Arizona in the Pac-12 championship game. That didn't happen. All right. Kansas, Illinois, a couple of programs with tournament history.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kansas because I just think Illinois, and when you've got a Big Ten that your number 1 seed, Chris Hassel, has more than 5 losses, that means everybody's just beating up on everybody. I don't think Illinois has the horses or they have the to get past a team like Kansas. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So Kansas moves on, and they're going to play VCU. This is going to be a tough matchup. It's going to be a really, really tough matchup for Kansas because of the way VCU plays, but they're the class of this field this year, so KU will be fine there. We go to the bottom. I think the Zags move on to the Sweet 16. I think they will beat TCU, although TCU is going to be a very, very tough out, and then they'll face UCLA. UCLA will easily get past Northwestern. This will be a team that Northwestern athletically just cannot compete with.
And that would be the old Adam Morrison crying game with Gus Johnson on the call. Remember the big comeback. All right, Kansas, VCU. VCU, I believe, is your only double-digit seed in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, and it's going to be – that's where they stop. They're not going to get past that. KU beats VCU, and then UCLA is going to be Gonzaga. Can you imagine, Chris Hassel, how great that UCLA-Gonzaga game is going to be on a Thursday or a Friday night?
Yes.
Oh, it's going to be an absolute banger. So I think this will be a great matchup, the 1 against the 2 for the right to go to the Final Four.
Okay, so, Coach, we're down to your Elite 8. Let's pick those Elite 8 matchups and see who goes to his Final Four. We're going to go to the West region, and that is where we have the number 1 overall seed, Alabama, facing an Arizona team not many people are talking about or picking to go a long way other than you.
Well, apparently I'm the only one. So Alabama coming out of the South against Virginia, and I really like them a lot. So when you look at my bracket right now, the only one turned in there is Arizona. And I like Arizona to beat Alabama. So we already had that, so my apologies. So Arizona.
I screwed you up because I said the West. It's the South, and you haven't beaten Alabama.
Can I throw you under the
You
bus?
absolutely can.
Okay.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
I'm going to take the Wildcats to beat Alabama. These are 2 elite scoring teams. They have elite talent. They have elite athletes, but I think Arizona right now is just too much for Alabama. Imagine the distractions over the course of the next 2 weeks that Alabama's going to have because of Brandon Miller. I think it ultimately will be too much. Arizona beats Alabama.
Duke as the 5 seed against the 2 seed Marquette in the East.
Yeah, I have Duke going to the Final Four. This is where Marquette's dream season ends. Duke is just trending, and how many times have we seen it, Chris, where a team really gets hot the last part of February, they play really well in their conference tournament, and then they sail into the March Madness. That's who Duke is this year. Do not sleep on them. They go to the Final Four.
And you can get Duke at 6-1 right now to win that regional in the East. To the Midwest we go for Houston and Texas.
Yeah, this was a tough call for me, but this is great. These are 2 teams that are starting to become rivals in the same state. They're only, 2.5 hours apart? But ultimately, Texas gets it done. When you watch how they play and how Houston played against Memphis, I don't trust Houston right now on the offensive end. I do trust Texas. They go to the Final Four.
Kansas, UCLA, who's your last Final Four participant? You don't have a 1 seed yet.
Well, I do now because I'm going to go with the Kansas Jayhawks because Kansas, I'm telling you, they are the type of team because Bill Self has such a great history through the NCAA tournament. They know how to navigate. Even if they get behind, they know how to navigate that. So it's going to be a repeat of the Big 12 championship game. Texas, Kansas, and then Arizona and Duke on the other side.
All right, so a 1, a couple of 2s, and a 5. Who do you have advancing to the national championship game on April the 3rd between Duke and Arizona?
Well, Chris Hassel, one of my incredible cappers, who's my nemesis on the early edge. His name is Eric Cohen. We call him EC. He's a big Arizona Wildcat guy. He hosts their podcast out there in Arizona. So I said, I've got to take him down once and for all. So I'm going to go on one side, Arizona, and Kansas on the other side.
Oh.
2 versus a 1.
I see what you're doing.
See what I did there?
Yes.
See what I did there? And so then the Kansas Jayhawks will do what very few teams have ever done in the history of basketball, and that is repeat as a national champion.
That would be the first time since Billy Donovan's Florida Gators did it, 06 and 07. Before that, it was the Christian Laettner Duke teams of the early 90s. So the coach, hey, give him credit. He picked Kansas last year too, right?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
But you pick him every year.
Well, you could have stopped with I picked them last year.
Got to be transparent. Kansas to win it all, according to the coach, and they would join a short list of programs that have gotten that done. Kansas, everything they've done throughout their incredible history, they've never done this, Coach.
It's hard to believe, but remember, they had a long stretch of history where they didn't even win a national championship. They had a lot of bad luck. So the last 10 years, now that they've got it going, they understand where they're at. All
right, we understand where we're at. We are with the coach, Jonathan Coachman, here on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight. That's his bracket for the Final Four.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.